My sister betrayed me with my husband for months, but when I found out my parents knew and were protecting her, I exposed them all at a family dinner that destroyed the entire family. I'm 30 years old. I work in digital marketing, and what I'm about to tell you probably sounds like something out of a cheap telenovela, but I swear all of this actually happened. About 6 months ago, I discovered that my older sister, Natalie, had been sleeping with my husband Liam for months. And the worst part, what really destroyed me, was that my parents knew about it and had been hiding it from me the whole time. I know, it sounds too twisted to be true, but that's exactly how it went down. I guess I should start with the family context, because without that, you can't really understand the magnitude of the betrayal. Natalie was always the golden child of the family, literally, for as long as I can remember. She's 2 years older than me, and from the time we were little, it was clear who the favorite was. She got good grades without trying too hard, was popular at school, dated the hottest guys, and my parents acted like everything she did deserved a gold medal. I, on the other hand, was the younger sister, the one always in the background. And honestly, I got used to it because I thought that's just how families worked. You know? There's always one who shines brighter. And, well, I wasn't that person. We grew up in Chicago, in a pretty quiet neighborhood, and from the outside, our family looked perfect. Dad worked in finance. Mom was a teacher. We had a nice house, vacations every summer, the whole upper middle class package. But inside, things were different. It's not that my parents were bad to me exactly, but the difference in how they treated Natalie versus how they treated me was so obvious that even our cousins noticed it. When Natalie graduated from college, they threw her this massive party with like 100 people. When I graduated 2 years later, we went to dinner at an Italian restaurant with just immediate family. Little things like that accumulate over the years until you realize you're basically invisible in your own family. I met Liam when I was 24 at a marketing conference downtown. He worked in sales for a software company, and we sat next to each other during one of those boring presentations about data analytics or something. We started talking, went out for coffee afterward, and the connection was immediate. He was handsome, funny, ambitious, and most important to me at that time, he made me feel seen. He listened when I talked, remembered things I told him, introduced me to his friends, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was someone's priority. We got married 2 years later, in 2019, right before the world went crazy with the pandemic. Natalie by then was already married to Brandon, a guy who worked in real estate and who honestly was too good for her, though I didn't see it at the time. Brandon was that type of person who's always willing to help, who treats everyone well, and who clearly adored Natalie. My parents obviously loved Brandon, but I think what they liked most was being able to brag that their perfect daughter had landed a successful husband with a huge house in the suburbs. I lived with Liam in a more modest apartment, and although we were happy, there was always that feeling that we weren't measuring up to the standards that Natalie and Brandon set. The first years of marriage were good. Honestly, Liam and I had our routine, our plans. We were saving to buy a house. We saw my family regularly, Sunday dinners and stuff like that, and everything seemed normal. Natalie was always a bit flirtatious. Anyone who knew her knew that. But I never thought she was capable of what I later discovered. She had that magnetic personality that attracted people, especially men, and I just assumed it was part of who she was. You know what I mean? Like she needed that constant attention, but without crossing any serious lines. Things started getting weird about a year ago. Liam began coming home late from work more frequently, always with excuses about new projects or important clients. He started using his phone differently, like more protective, never left it lying around like before. And there was this distance between us that I couldn't explain well, like he was physically present, but mentally somewhere else. I'd ask him what was wrong, and he always said he was stressed about work, that they had high quotas to meet, and I believed him because I wanted to believe him. I guess. Natalie was also acting weird, but in a different way. She started mentioning Liam more often in casual conversations, like, oh, Liam recommended this show to me, or Liam told me this restaurant is good. At first, I didn't think much of it because our families got together often. It was normal for them to talk. But then I started noticing that she always found excuses to be near him. At family gatherings, I would sit next to him, touch his arm when she talked, laugh way too loud at his jokes. I felt paranoid thinking these things. Told myself I was imagining problems where there weren't any. The moment that changed everything, The exact moment my world shattered was 6 months ago. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was working from home and had finished early. My parents had called me earlier to ask something about Mom's birthday that was coming up, and I called them back around 3 in the afternoon. The phone rang several times and I was about to hang up when they answered, but they didn't say hello or anything. I just heard their voices talking in the background. They had forgotten to hang up or had answered it by accident. I don't know. But the speaker was on, and I could hear their conversation perfectly. Mom was saying something about Natalie, and at first I thought they were talking about some minor drama. But then I heard Dad say we need to make sure Isabel doesn't find out about Natalie and Liam. And I felt like someone had thrown a bucket of ice water on me. I froze there, sitting at my desk, with the phone pressed to my ear, while they kept talking like nothing. Mom said something about how Natalie had promised her she was going to end things soon, that she just needed a little more time. And Dad responded that he hoped so because the situation was getting very complicated and they didn't want Isabel to suffer, but they also couldn't force Natalie to do anything. I couldn't breathe properly. I literally felt like I was going to pass out. I kept listening, hoping they'd say something that would make it all make sense in a different way. But it only got worse. Mom mentioned that Brandon didn't suspect anything yet, that it was important to keep it that way, and that the priority was protecting Natalie because she was going through a difficult time. A difficult time? She was screwing my husband and they were protecting her? Dad said something about how he understood that Natalie felt her marriage to Brandon had become boring, that she needed excitement, and that these things happen but eventually she'd get over it. They were talking about my sisters and my husband's betrayal, like it was a temporary hobby she was going to outgrow, like signing up for yoga classes or something. I hung up the phone quietly and just sat there. I don't know how long. Just staring at the wall. I think I was in shock because I didn't cry immediately. I just felt empty and confused. All the weird signs from the past month suddenly made perfect sense. Liam's late arrivals, the way Natalie acted around him, the times my parents had changed the subject when I walked in mid-conversation. Everyone knew except me. Everyone had been lying to me while I went on with my normal life, not knowing I was the idiot of the situation. When Liam got home that night, he acted completely normal. Asked me how my day was, gave me a kiss on the cheek, poured himself a beer. I watched him and thought about how someone could be such a good liar. How he could look me in the eye and pretend everything was fine while betraying me with my own sister. I didn't say anything that night. I stayed awake until 3 in the morning while he slept, thinking about what to do. Part of me wanted to wake him up screaming and demand explanations, but another part, the colder and more calculating part I didn't know I had, told me to wait, that I needed proof, that I needed a plan. The next few days were probably the hardest of my life. I had to act normal in front of everyone while inside I was dying. I went to Sunday family dinner and had to sit at the same table as Natalie, as Liam, as my parents, pretending everything was perfectly fine. Natalie was particularly cheerful that day, telling some story about a trip she and Brandon were planning. And I looked at her thinking, how was it possible for someone to be so shameless? Liam avoided making eye contact with me as much as he could. And now that I knew the truth, his discomfort was so obvious I was surprised nobody else noticed it. I started gathering evidence. I waited for Liam to shower one night and checked his phone, and what I found was worse than I imagined. Messages with Natalie that went back almost 8 months. Photos they'd sent each other, some explicit ones that made me nauseous. Emails coordinating meetings at hotels while I thought Liam was on business trips. There was a thread of messages where Natalie told him that her parents had given them the green light to keep seeing each other as long as they were discreet and didn't hurt Isabel publicly, as if that made it better somehow. I took photos and screenshots of everything, saved them to my Google Drive, made sure I had backup copies in 3 different places. I also found messages between Natalie and other people. And that's when I discovered this wasn't just about Liam. Apparently, my perfect sister had been having affairs with several married men over the past few years, including her best friend Amber's husband, a guy named Scott. There were messages from Natalie complaining to Liam about how hard it was to keep all her relationships separate. She literally talked about her love life like she was managing a project calendar. It was sick. About 2 weeks after discovering everything, Mom called me with a request that in another universe would have been sweet, but in this context was absolutely cynical. She asked if I could organize Natalie's baby shower. Yeah. Turns out Natalie was pregnant. News she had announced at another family dinner I'd attended, pretending to be happy for her while inside I wanted to throw up. Mom said it would be nice for the sisters to do something together, that she knew I was good at organizing events, and that it would mean a lot to Natalie. The audacity of that woman to ask me that, knowing what she knew, was incredible. And this is where my vengeful side, which honestly I didn't know existed, took total control. I told Mom that, of course, I'd be delighted to organize my sister's baby shower, that I was going to make something really memorable. And boy, did I. I spent the next few weeks planning the most elaborate event you could imagine, got a nice venue, hired catering, organized perfect decorations with a baby theme, invited everyone, literally everyone, the whole family, Natalie's friends, neighbors, people from Brandon's work, like 80 people in total. Natalie was thrilled. Sent me messages every day thanking me, saying I was the best sister in the world. The irony burned. The day of the baby shower, I arrived early to make sure everything was perfect. I had prepared a PowerPoint presentation supposedly to show cute photos of Natalie through the years, special moments, that kind of sentimental stuff you do at those events. I had asked my cousin Ruby, who's like my only real ally in the family and who knew the whole situation, to do a Facebook live stream of the event for relatives who couldn't attend. Ruby was more than willing to help me because she'd never been able to stand Natalie and was jumping with excitement at the idea of watching her fall. Guests started arriving, all happy and excited. Brandon was there being the proud future dad, my parents acting like the perfect grandparents, Natalie at the center of it all, receiving gifts and attention as always. Liam was also there because obviously he'd been invited as my husband, and I saw him exchange a quick glance with Natalie when they thought no one was watching. That look gave me the final strength I needed to do what I was about to do. After they ate and opened some gifts, I took the microphone and announced it was time for the special presentation. Everyone settled into their seats, the lights dimmed a bit, and Ruby gave me a thumbs up indicating the live stream was active and had a good audience. I started with normal slides, photos of baby Natalie, from school, her wedding to Brandon, things that made everyone say aw and feel emotional. And then, without warning, the next slide was a photo Natalie had sent Liam, a very intimate photo where she was in lingerie. The silence in the room was instant. Before anyone could react, I continued with more slides. Screenshots of conversations between them, messages where they planned their meetings, emails where Natalie talked about lying to Brandon and me, even screenshots of conversations with our parents where they discussed how to keep me in the dark. Each slide that passed was like a nuclear bomb. I could hear gasps from the audience. Someone dropped a glass that shattered on the floor, but I kept going without stopping. I also included conversations between Natalie and Scott, Amber's husband, showing that affair had been happening simultaneously with Liam's. Amber was there at the baby shower, sitting like 3 rows away, and I saw her go completely pale when she saw her husband's messages with my sister. The last slide was a text message where Natalie told someone, it wasn't clear who, that she loved the thrill of deceiving everyone and had never felt more alive. When the presentation ended and the lights came back on, the silence was deafening. Natalie was standing, white as a sheet, with her hands on her stomach. Brandon was looking at her with an expression I'll never forget, a mixture of total confusion, horror, and pain. My parents were trying to say something, but no words came out. Liam had run out of the room. I saw him out of the corner of my eye. And I just stood there at the front with the microphone still in my hand, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction, pain, and complete emptiness. Brandon was the first to move. He got up, walked directly toward Natalie, and said, loud and clear for everyone to hear, "Is the baby mine?" It wasn't a question. It was a demand for an answer. Natalie started crying and stammering something about how they could talk in private, but he kept insisting, "Tell me now, in front of everyone, is that baby mine?" She couldn't look him in the eye. He waited like 30 seconds, that felt eternal. And when she didn't answer, he simply said, "You have 1 hour to get your things out of my house," and left. The door slam when he left the room echoed in the silence. Amber had gotten up and was walking toward where Scott was, who also looked like he wanted to disappear. She yelled at him, "How long? Just tell me how long you've been sleeping with this bitch." And Scott said nothing, which was basically a confession. Amber grabbed her purse and left without looking back. Several more guests started leaving, some clearly uncomfortable, others clearly angry. My aunt, Ruby's mom, looked at me with what seemed like respect and a bit of fear, as if she'd just discovered I was capable of something she never would have imagined. My parents finally found their voice. Mom came toward me saying, "Isabel, How could you do this? This is horrible. And I just responded as horrible as hearing you discuss how to keep me ignorant that my husband was cheating on me with my sister. Dad tried the angle that this wasn't the way to handle things, that I had destroyed the family. And I laughed. A laugh that sounded a bit hysterical even to me. I told them I didn't destroy anything. You and Natalie did that months ago. I just made sure everyone knew the truth. Natalie kept crying, surrounded by the remains of her baby shower, unopened gifts everywhere, cheerful decorations that now seemed mocking. She tried to approach me, saying, "Isabel, please let me explain." But I stepped back. "I don't want to hear anything you have to say," I told her, and I left the room, leaving her there with the mess she herself had created. The days after were an absolute whirlwind. The baby shower video went viral in our community. Ruby hadn't uploaded it to public social media, but enough people shared it that basically everyone in our social circle saw it. Brandon effectively kicked Natalie out of the house and filed divorce papers like 3 days later. Liam tried calling me like 1,000 times, left crying voicemails, saying it had been a horrible mistake, that he loved me. All the typical garbage they say when they get caught. I didn't answer any calls. I hired a lawyer the next day and also started the divorce process. What I didn't expect was the next revelation that came to light about 2 weeks later. Turns out Amber, devastated by Scott's betrayal, insisted that Natalie get a paternity test as soon as the baby was born, because she'd discovered from more messages that the dates of Natalie's affair with Scott coincided perfectly with her pregnancy. Natalie resisted at first, but Brandon, who was still technically her husband until the divorce was finalized, had a legal right to demand the test, so she had no choice. The baby was born prematurely. I guess all the stress affected her, and the paternity test was done as soon as it was medically possible. The baby was Scott's, not Brandon's, who had been excited about being a father for months. Scott's, the husband of Natalie's supposed best friend. When those results came out, it was like watching a sequel to the baby shower, but worse. Brandon had maintained some contact with Natalie because he believed the baby might be his. Some part of him still had hope, apparently, but when they confirmed it wasn't his child, he cut all communication completely. And Liam. Stupid Liam. When he found out the baby wasn't Brandon's but some other guy's, he finally processed that Natalie had been juggling like 3 men at the same time, including him, and his ego couldn't handle it. He'd been begging me to get back together, promising that Natalie meant nothing, but as soon as he found out the full truth about her, he blocked her from everything and stopped answering her messages. The irony of him abandoning her for doing exactly what he'd done to me wasn't lost on me. Scott also ended up separating from Amber, who obviously couldn't forgive him, and at first it seemed like he was going to take care of Natalie and the baby. But when the reality of the situation set in, when he realized he was going to lose his marriage, probably half his assets, and would also have to pay child support for a baby that was the product of an affair, his enthusiasm evaporated quickly. He's still legally responsible for the child, but the romantic relationship between him and Natalie never really existed beyond the affair. My parents tried to do damage control, calling me to say they'd acted wrong, that they shouldn't have covered for Natalie, but that at the end of the day, we were still family and needed to get past it. I told them I'd made a mistake 30 years ago thinking we had a real family, and that mistake was corrected now. I blocked their numbers after that conversation. I haven't talked to them in months, and honestly, I don't miss them as much as I thought I would. Natalie ended up back at my parents' house with a newborn baby. No husband, no friends, because everyone had cut her out of their lives, without the men she'd been juggling. For the last time I heard about her through Ruby was that she was in therapy, trying to understand how she got to that point, but mostly just bitter and playing the victim. My parents are supporting her financially, because Brandon obviously owes her nothing, and Scott pays the minimum the court orders. My divorce from Liam was finalized about 2 months ago. It was relatively simple, because we had few shared assets, and I just wanted to get out of that situation as quickly as possible. He tried until the last moment to get me to reconsider, but there was absolutely nothing to say. We sold the apartment, divided what we had to divide, and I haven't seen him since we signed the final papers. I blocked all his social media and asked our mutual friends not to update me about his life. Now I live alone in a studio in a different part of Chicago, work from home most of the time, and I'm rebuilding my life completely from scratch. I'm not going to lie and say I'm completely fine, because I'm not. There are days where I wake up and still can't believe all this really happened, that my own family betrayed me that way. I'm in therapy, working through the massive trust issues this left me with, trying to understand how I move forward. But there's also something liberating about all this. Something I didn't expect to feel. I'm no longer living in Natalie's shadow. I'm no longer trying to win the love and approval of parents who clearly never saw me as equal to my sister. I'm no longer in a marriage where I was being cheated on and disrespected. I lost my family of origin and my husband, but what I gained was clarity about who I really am, without all those toxic relationships weighing me down. People ask me if I regret how I handled everything, if it would have been better to confront them privately instead of exposing them publicly in such a dramatic and nuclear way. The honest answer is no. I don't regret it one bit. They had humiliated me privately for months, laughing at me behind my back, treating me like I was too stupid to notice what was happening. They deserved for their betrayal to be as public as their hypocrisy. If I'd handled everything privately, they would have found a way to spin the story, to make me look like the villain or the crazy one. This way ensured everyone knew exactly who they really were. Ruby is still my only connection to that part of the family, and she's told me the family dynamic is completely shattered now. There are aunts and uncles who stopped talking to my parents because of how they handled everything, others who sided with Brandon in the divorce because everyone loved him. Natalie is basically a social pariah. None of her old friends want anything to do with her. My parents tried to have a Christmas dinner last year and only like 5 people showed up. I guess you reap what you sow. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd never overheard that phone call from my parents, if I'd stayed in ignorance indefinitely. Natalie probably would have eventually ended things with Liam like she promised she would, and I would have continued with my marriage never knowing it had been violated that way. I would have kept being the obedient younger sister who attended all the family dinners and celebrated Natalie's achievements, while mine were ignored. The thought gives me chills. I'm dating someone new now. Nothing serious yet because clearly I need to work on my issues before committing to another relationship. But it's someone I met at a work networking event who has no connection to my previous life. I've told him pieces of the story, but not everything. I'm not ready to bring someone new into all that drama yet. For now, it's enough to have someone who treats me well and isn't related to any of the people who betrayed me. I'm still working in digital marketing. Actually got a promotion a few months ago because I threw myself completely into work as a form of distraction during the hardest moments of the divorce. I bought plants. For my studio, I'm adopting a cat next month. I'm taking pottery classes on Saturdays. Small things that make me feel like I'm building a life that's completely mine, without the influence of people who proved they didn't have my best interest in mind. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive Natalie, Liam, or my parents. Right now, I'm not even in a place where I want to consider forgiveness, honestly. What they did was unforgivable in my mind, and I don't see how any kind of apology or explanation could change that. Natalie actively chose to destroy my marriage with someone from my own family. Liam chose to betray the vows we made. My parents chose to protect the person who was hurting me instead of telling me the truth. Those weren't impulsive decisions or mistakes. They were conscious choices made over and over for months. And the biggest lesson I took from all this is that family isn't always your safety net. Sometimes the people you trust most are exactly the people who will betray you in the worst ways. And when that happens, you don't have to forgive or maintain those relationships just because you share blood. You can choose to walk away, cut contact, and build a new life with people who actually value you. It's not easy, and it's not what society tells you should do, but sometimes it's the healthiest thing. Ruby told me last week that Natalie is trying to contact me through her, that she wants to talk, that she feels she deserves the chance to explain her side of the story. I told Ruby to tell Natalie, there's absolutely nothing she can say that I want to hear, now or ever. That part of my life is closed, sealed, and buried. I'm looking forward now, not back at a family that never really had me as a priority. I'm 30 years old, I'm divorced, estranged from my family, and starting completely over. Some people might see that as a failure or a tragedy, but I see it as liberation. Yes, it hurts. There are still days where the weight of it all crushes me, and I have to remind myself I survived the worst. But there are also days where I wake up in my studio, look around at this small but honest life I'm building, and feel genuinely hopeful about the future for the first time in years. I'm no longer living a lie. I'm no longer surrounded by people who see me as expendable, and that's worth all the pain I had to go through to get here.